What if Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen grew up together? Not in comfort. Not in a palace with dragons overhead and armies at their feet and stories told about who they were supposed to be. In a fishing village on the far coast of the Vale. In 3 rooms above a harbour that smelled like salt and old rope. In the care of Sir Willem Darry, dying by degrees in the bed by the window, and a rotating cast of servants who came and went as the money did the same. Ned Stark's impossible second secret. The first secret, Jon, was hidden in the north inside his own household, covered by the shame of a bastard his wife resented and the world ignored. The second secret arrived across the narrow sea when Jon was 2 years old, brought by a letter from Willem Darry that said, in essence, I have a girl. She is innocent. I am dying. You are the only man in the realm I trust with this. He could have said no. He nearly did. Catelyn's face when he told her, not then, years later, when it was already done and the girl was already installed in the Vale, and there was no undoing any of it, was the face of a woman who had extended every grace she had and was now watching it be taken for granted again. She didn't shout. She sat. She said, "Is there anything else, Ned? Any other secret children of dead dynasties you're protecting?" He didn't have an answer for that. He paid for the house in the Vale. He arranged the servants. He visited when he could, which wasn't often. And he watched 2 children grow up at the edge of the known world without knowing what the other one was. Jon knew he was a bastard. He'd been told that much. Daenerys knew she was someone's daughter. Darry had told her that much before he died. Neither of them knew the rest. For a while, that was enough. The Vale, Saltwater House. 289 AC. The first thing Daenerys ever said to Jon Snow was, "You're not supposed to be here." She was 4. He was 5. She'd found him in the kitchen eating from her bowl, and she stood in the doorway in a grey dress 3 sizes too big for her, silver hair matted from sleep, and stared at him with those eyes. Violet, already uncanny, with the full indignant authority of someone who owned a bowl and intended to defend it. Jon kept eating. She walked to the table and sat down and watched him until he finished. When he put the bowl down, she said, "Are you staying?" "Lord Stark says so." "Who's Lord Stark?" "The man who pays for the house." She thought about this. "Does he pay for your food too?" "I think so." "Then I suppose it's fine." She reached across and took the bowl to check if there was anything left. There wasn't. "What's your name?" "Jon." "I'm Daenerys." She said it with the gravity of someone presenting credentials. "But you can call me Dany. Everyone does." He didn't. Not for years. He called her Daenerys for so long she eventually forgot she'd told him he could use the short version, and by the time she remembered it had become a thing. "Jon calls me Daenerys," a distinction she didn't examine too closely, because examining it would require understanding why it felt like something. They were not friends at first. They were 2 children in the same house, competing for the attention of a man who was mostly asleep, and the goodwill of servants who had complicated feelings about both of them. They ate together because there was one table. They slept on opposite ends of the same corridor. They fought about everything available to fight about. Window seat rights, candle access. Which of the 2 harbour cats was whose? With the focused creativity of children who have nothing to do and no one to do it with. Then Sir Willem died. He died on a Tuesday in autumn when the rain was coming sideways off the harbour, and both of them were in the room because there was nowhere else to go. It wasn't dramatic. He was there. And then he wasn't, in the way of old men who have been leaving for a long time. Daenerys held his hand. Jon stood by the door because he wasn't sure if he was allowed closer. Afterward, they sat on the stairs for a long time without talking. Finally, she said, "Do you know what happens to us now?" Lord Stark comes. And if he doesn't? Jon had no answer for this. He was 6, and it was the question he'd been living inside for his whole conscious life without the vocabulary for it. She said, "I had a brother. Before. He's in Bravos." She didn't look at him when she said it. Sir Willem said he couldn't take us both. He said my brother was too old to be hidden. A beat. I don't know if that's true or if he just didn't want to. Jon didn't know what to do with this. He said the only thing that felt solid. "Lord Stark will come." She looked at him. Something weighing in the look. "You believe that?" "He always comes when he says he will." She thought about this for a long time. Then she moved over on the stairs, making room. Not much. They were narrow stairs. And he sat down beside her, and they waited together. And 3 days later, Ned Stark walked through the door. That was the beginning. Saltwater House, 293 acres. They were 10 and 9 when Daenerys found the books. Not Ned's books. He left those locked. These were Daenerys, stacked in the chest under the dead man's bed, wrapped in oilcloth against the damp. She found them on a rainy afternoon when Jon was at his sword lessons with the retired man-at-arms Ned had arranged, and she pulled them out one by one with the methodical focus she applied to anything that seemed like it might contain answers. Most of it was dull. Household accounts. Letters from people she didn't know. Then, a history of the Targaryen dynasty. She read for 6 hours straight. When Jon came home and found her, she'd read it twice and was halfway through a third pass, sitting cross-legged on the floor with the candle burning low and her silver hair pushed back from her face, and she looked up at him with an expression he'd never seen on her before. "Jon." "What?" She held out the book. He read the page she'd marked. Then the 3 before it. Then he put the book down and looked at her. She asked, "Do you know anything about your mother?" "No." Lord Stark won't say. "He says she died." "He doesn't say more." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "My father was heiress Targaryen, the Mad King." Matter of fact, the way she said things when she was holding them at arm's length so they couldn't hurt her. "He burned people. With wildfire. For fun." She looked at the book. He's what they were talking about when they started the war. Jon sat down on the floor across from her. "Does that change things?" she asked. "About me. For you. You're not him. I have his blood. You also have..." He tried to remember the history. "Your mother was Rhaella. The histories say she was kind." Daenerys absorbed this. Sir Willem said she died on a ship. She touched the book's cover. "In a storm. Getting me away from King's Landing." She didn't say the rest of it. She died getting me out. But it sat in the room between them. Jon said, "Lord Stark died to get you out too. In a sense. He's been lying to everyone for years. That costs something. For a man like him." She hadn't thought of it that way. He watched her think of it now. "Why are you hidden?" she asked. "What's Lord Stark hiding you from?" "I don't know." "That doesn't bother you?" It did. Profoundly. But Jon had learned young that some discomforts were better carried than examined. And this was one of them. We'll know eventually. Or we could find out now. We could. But you won't. He'll tell us when it's time. She looked at him with the violet eyes that already had a full catalogue of his tendencies organized behind them. "You are so trusting. It's going to get you killed." "Probably." He gestured at the book. "Are you going to read it again?" "Shut up." She read it again. The Vale. The practice yard. 295 acres. By the time they were 12 and 11, They'd worked out a routine. Jon trained in the mornings with Sir Rodwell. Ned had upgraded from the retired man-at-arms when it became clear Jon had real ability, and Daenerys watched from the fence, which she'd been doing since she was 9 and which she would deny if anyone asked. In the afternoons, they read together, which was her domain. She had a system for the library. Histories before theory. Theory before application. Never skip the chapters everyone else skips, because that's where the actual information was hidden. Jon was a better fighter. She was a better student. Each of them privately knew this, and neither of them said it, which was its own kind of economy. Then Sir Rodwell started losing. Not badly at first, the occasional exchange where Jon's reach or reflex caught him wrong, where something the boy had been drilling in private came out in practice. But it accelerated, and within 6 months it was obvious to everyone, including Sir Rodwell, that the man had reached the ceiling of what he could teach. Daenerys watched the last session from the fence with her arms folded. After Rodwell left, she said, "You're going to need a better teacher. Rodwell's fine. Rodwell lost to you 3 times in a row and spent the last hour teaching you techniques you'd already invented on your own." She dropped off the fence. "You need someone who can actually challenge you. Lord Stark isn't here." She picked up a fallen practice sword. "I've been watching you train for 3 years. I know the forms." He laughed. He couldn't help it. "Don't do that," she said. "You've never held a—" She attacked. Not well. Her grip was off and her weight was wrong, and she left her left side completely open every time she committed. But she was faster than he expected and smarter about angles than Rodwell had ever been, and when he adjusted for the grip, she adjusted for his adjustment, and the exchange lasted about 40 seconds before she landed a hit on his shoulder that was more or less an accident, but hurt enough to prove a point. Jon stood back, rubbed his shoulder. "Your left side," she said. "I know. You always protect your right. When you think you're about to land something, you pull left and leave yourself open. How long have you noticed that?" "A while." He looked at her holding the practice sword with the wrong grip that had somehow still found his shoulder. "You need a better teacher, too." She raised an eyebrow. They trained together after that. It was terrible for the first month and improved by degrees after that. She never matched him physically and didn't try. She was building something different, a fighting style that relied on reading the opponent rather than overpowering them, which suited her, and which Jon began to understand was possibly more dangerous in the long run. They pushed each other. They also, on 2 notable occasions, gave each other injuries that required explaining to the servants, who had developed a collective and entirely correct suspicion that nothing they were told about these 2 children was the full picture. Saltwater House. 297 acres, Ned tells them. Ned tells them on a grey morning in early spring. He doesn't plan it. He has been planning it for 3 years, and the plans have never survived contact with actually sitting down across from 2 14 and 13-year-olds and saying the words. But he arrives the night before without announcement, and he sees them at dinner, Jon arguing with Daenerys about something in a history they've clearly both read. The argument close and specific in the way of people who have been sharpening each other for years, and he understands that they have outgrown the secret. In the morning he sits them down. They both know something is coming. He watches them register it simultaneously. The way Jon goes still, and Daenerys straightens, and both of them are suddenly very attentive in the manner of people who have been waiting for this, specifically this, for a long time. He starts with Jon. He tells it the way he always knew he'd eventually have to. Straight through, no softening, the Tower of Joy, and Arthur Dayne, and the woman at the top of the stairs. Lyanna's name, Rhaegar's. The promise Jon has been the living proof of for 14 years. Jon doesn't move, doesn't speak. When Ned finishes, he sits with it for a long moment and then asks, "Rhaegar Targaryen?" "Yes." "The one Robert killed?" "Yes." A beat. He glances at Daenerys. Can't help it. The information is suddenly connecting itself to her in ways it didn't before. And she's looking back at him with wide eyes and an expression he's never seen on her. Not quite shock. Something past it, she says very quietly. He was my brother. The room goes silent. Ned looks between them. Your mother, Jon says. Rhaella. She's doing the thing she does, holding it at arm's length, sorting through it, refusing to react before she's understood it. He was my oldest brother. Sir Willem never mentioned. She stops, starts again. That makes you my nephew. Jon stares at her. By blood, she clarifies, as if this is the part that needs clarifying. I know what it makes me. You look like you'd been hit. I had been hit. They look at each other across the table. 13 years of being the only constant in each other's lives. Two children with wrong names and missing origins, who found each other in a house above a harbour. And now there is a word for what they are, family, in the oldest and most literal sense, and neither of them has any idea what to do with it. Daenerys turns to Ned. There's something shifting in her face now, the arm's-length discipline cracking at the edges. You knew, this whole time. Yes, you put us in the same house. I thought. Ned stops, chooses his words with the care of a man who has rehearsed this and found the rehearsal inadequate. I thought you would be safer together than apart. I thought if something happened to me, you'd have each other. And you didn't think to mention that we were related. I was waiting until you were old enough. She looks at him with an expression that is not quite anger and not quite grief, and contains a quantity of both. Old enough for what? This doesn't get easier when you're older. Ned doesn't have an answer for that either. She's right. He's spent 3 years deferring a conversation that doesn't have a good time, and the deferral has cost something. He can see it in the way they're sitting, the recalibration happening in real time. Jon says, the wall. What about it? The Night's Watch. That's where I was supposed to go eventually. Lord Stark spoke of it. He still can't say it. The words are there, and he can see them, and he can't say them yet. If my father was Rhaegar, what does that mean for the wall? Nothing changes, Ned says. The threat is real, regardless of... That's not what I'm asking. Jon looks at him. I'm asking what I am. I'm asking what my name actually is. Your mother named you Aegon. Aegon Targaryen. The name sits in the room, like a stone dropped in water. Daenerys exhales. Jon says, I'm not using that name. You don't have to. I'm Jon. I'm Jon. Ned nods. He doesn't push. Daenerys says, Aegon VI. Not commentary, calculation. If Viserys is still alive in Braavos, he has a claim. If you are Rhaegar's son, your claim supersedes Viserys entirely. She's already somewhere else in her head, running through the implications, which is what she does when emotions get too large, and logic is the more manageable territory. The two of us together are a succession crisis. Or a restoration, Ned says. He said it, Jon points out. She almost smiles. Almost. It's the first almost smile in the room, and it breaks something loose in the weight of the morning. Jon laughs, short, half disbelieving, and she does too, briefly, and then neither of them quite knows what to do next. They manage it the way they manage everything, the way they learn to, in a house above a harbour, figuring it out as they went. The Vale, 296 AC. The direwolf. The wolf arrived on Jon's 13th birthday, and nobody explained how. One morning it wasn't there. That afternoon it was sitting in the yard with its amber eyes tracking the training session, white as the moon, the size of a large dog and growing visibly by the week. The servants were unanimous in wanting it gone. The servants were also unanimous in not being the person who told it to leave. Daenerys walked up to it on the first day. She approached from the front, which nobody else had tried. The 3 servants who'd attempted to deal with it had come from behind or beside. She walked up from directly in front, stopped 2 feet away, and looked at it. The wolf looked back at her. Jon, watching from the doorway. "You shouldn't." She crouched down, extended one hand. The wolf sniffed her wrist with thoroughness, and then nothing. No growl, no retreat. Just the wolf sitting there in its own assessment with her hand near its face. "He's not gonna bite you," Jon said. He sounded certain about this before he'd worked out why. "I know." She stood. "He's yours somehow. I don't know how, but he is." Jon came across the yard. The wolf's attention shifted immediately, tracking him. Not as prey. Something else. Something that was about recognition rather than threat. He sat cross-legged in the dirt. The wolf padded over and put its massive head in his lap. And that was that. Daenerys watched this with an expression Jon would come to know well. A thing landing that she hadn't expected, filed away, being incorporated into whatever structure she was always building inside her head. "Ghost," Jon said. "What?" "His name." She looked at the white wolf, the amber eyes, the silence of it. "Ghost," she repeated, then dryly. "Original. Says the girl who named both harbour cats Cat. They're cats. It's accurate. Ghost lived with them after that. He was almost never seen by people outside the house. Not because they hid him, exactly, but because he was a wolf with very good situational awareness and seemed to understand the concept of discretion without being asked. He slept at the foot of Jon's bed, and occasionally, when the house was quiet and Jon was reading late, Daenerys would come down the corridor and find the 2 of them in the chair by the window, and Ghost's tail would thump once against the floor, and she'd drag the other chair over and read beside them without comment. 3 years of that. She never tried to explain what the wolf was or where he'd come from. Neither did Jon. Some things didn't require explanation. Some things simply arrived and were true. The Vale, after 297 AC. Ned leaves 3 days later. The night before he goes, Jon finds Daenerys at the harbour. She's sitting on the dock with her feet hanging over the edge, watching the ships in the dark. He sits beside her. Neither of them says anything for a while. They've always been comfortable with that. The silences don't need filling between them. Eventually, she says, "Are you angry?" "At who?" "Lord Stark." "For not telling us sooner?" "No." He means it. He was afraid. People do strange things when they're afraid for someone. "You're very forgiving." "I've had a lot of practice not being angry about things I can't change." She looks at him sideways. He's looking out at the water. The firelight from the house catches the angle of his face. He has her brother's colouring, apparently. She didn't know what Rhaegar looked like until Ned brought her a portrait 3 days ago, and she's been quietly cataloguing the resemblances and half-resemblances since. The darkness of the hair, something around the jaw. But the grey eyes are entirely someone else's. "My mother died having me," she says. "My brother died before he became anything. My father burned the world down. My other brother is in Braavos building his claim on grievance and bitterness." A beat. "I have terrible family. You have me. You're my nephew. By a pretty extraordinary chain of events." She concedes this. "You're also the only person I've ever trusted without reservation," which seems like it should be a separate category from nephew. Jon looks at her. It is a separate category. The categories are confusing now. Yes, they sit with that. She says, "Robert Baratheon wants us dead. He doesn't know we exist." "He will. Eventually. She pulls her feet up and hugs her knees. The wind off the harbour is cold. Ned's running out of time to hide us. Whatever is happening in the capital, the things he doesn't tell us but we can read in the ravens when he leaves them unattended. You've been reading his ravens? Occasionally, yes. Daenerys. Joffrey is going to be king. She cuts him off. And Joffrey is... I've read enough about him. He's going to be terrible. And when he is terrible, things will break apart. And when they break apart, people will start looking for alternatives. She turns to look at him directly. We are the alternative. Neither of us wants to be the alternative. What we want doesn't seem like it's going to be the deciding factor. He can't argue with that. He's thought about it too. In the night, in the training yard, in the long hours after Ned's revelations when the architecture of his life rearranged itself around new information. He'd thought about what Daenerys was almost certainly already 2 steps past. We need to go south, he says. King's Landing? Not yet. We need more than we have. We need to know the city. We need allies. He's reasoning it out as he speaks. If we arrive in King's Landing as the last Targaryens, with no army and no allies, we're dead before we finish introducing ourselves. You've been thinking about this. You have too. You're just further along than me. She doesn't deny it. Varys. What? The Master of Whisperers. He's been at the Red Keep since the beginning of Robert's reign. There are letters in Darry's chest. I found them 6 months ago, and I've been waiting to tell you. Letters from Varys to Darry, years old, saying he knew where we were and that he was watching. She looks at him steadily. He's known about us for years. He hasn't told Robert. Jon absorbs this. He's been waiting, she continues. For what, I don't know. But he's been waiting. And if he's waiting, he probably has something in mind for when the right moment arrives. The harbour moves in the dark. Somewhere out there a ship rings its bell. We go south, Jon says. Not to King's Landing. We go to the capital's edges first. Find Varys. Find out what he knows and what he wants. And if what he wants isn't what we want, then we find someone else. She looks at him. You're actually planning this. You planned it first. I had a framework. You have a timeline. She tilts her head. When did you get decisive? I've always been decisive. I've just been deciding things in private. King's Landing. The capital's edges. 298 AC. They arrive in King's Landing on a merchant ship as merchants. Not convincingly. Neither of them has the temperament for it. Daenerys is too watchful, and Jon is too careful in the way of someone who has been trained to fight rather than to sell cloth. But the city is vast and distracted by its own appetite, and nobody is looking for 2 teenagers from the Vale who look, to an untrained eye, like a brother and sister of middling means. Daenerys finds lodgings in the Street of Silk, not the brothel end, the respectable end, where merchants and minor clerks and the occasional SEP-trained scholar take rooms by the week. She negotiates the price herself in the matter-of-fact way. She does everything. And the landlord, confronted with her violet eyes and her complete lack of patience for being underestimated, gives them his second-best room at a rate that probably represents a small personal loss for him. Jon watches this from the doorway. When the landlord leaves, did you have to intimidate him? I didn't intimidate him. I looked at him. That's the same thing. She ignores this and begins unpacking, taking a methodical inventory of the room the way she takes inventory of everything. Exits, sightlines, vulnerabilities. We need to get to Varys without going through the Red Keep. He has an entirely separate network. Birds, Ned said once. Little birds in the city. Then we need to be visible to his birds. She sits on the bed and looks at him. We need to be where information is traded. The city is where information is traded. All of it. Everywhere. All the time. Jon has discovered this in the 48 hours he's been inside its walls. The relentless, ambient intelligence of 500,000 people existing in close proximity. Fleabottom knows what the Red Keep had for dinner. The Street of Steel knows who's buying weapons and in what quantities. The harbour knows which lords are moving men. He spends 3 days learning the harbour. She spends 3 days in the markets. On the 4th day, a child drops a note at their door. It says, "The spider is interested in the thread. Tell the silver girl to leave her window unlatched tonight." Daenerys reads it twice. Looks at Jon. "Silver girl," he says. "He knows what I look like." "He's known what you look like for years, apparently." She sets the note down, something adjusting behind her eyes. Tonight, then. Varys. That night. He comes through the window at midnight. Not himself. A child, first, checking the room with the quick, wordless efficiency of someone who does this often. And then the window again. And then Varys, stepping over the sill in his soft shoes with the unhurried movement of a man who has been doing this for decades and has never once been caught. He looks at them both. "You're younger than I expected," he says, "and older at the same time." Which is a contradiction I suspect you've heard before. "How long have you known?" Daenerys asked. "About you, since Darry first brought you west." He settles into the chair by the window with his hands folded in his lap. "About both of you? Since Lord Stark had the boy." A beat. "I am very good at my work." Jon asks, "Why haven't you told Robert?" "Because Robert would have you killed. And Robert killing you would be a waste of something rare and irreplaceable, which I find inefficient." That's a very cold reason to keep 2 people alive. Varys looks at him with the full weight of careful attention. The warm reason is that I serve the realm. And the realm, whatever people say about dynasties and bloodlines, needs to survive what is coming. The cold reason is that the warm reason is true. Daenerys cuts in. What's coming? From the north or from the capital? There are 2 things coming. They are unrelated and equally catastrophic. He tells them about Joffrey. Not the details they already knew, but the shape of it, the succession, Cersei's plans, the specific fragility of a reign built on a foundation that is already cracking. He tells them about the Night's Watch reports that the small council has been discarding for a decade. He tells it without drama, the way you relay information you've been carrying for too long and are finally giving to someone equipped to carry it. When he finishes, the room is quiet for a moment. Jon says, "You've been waiting for us." "I've been waiting for the right configuration." "You together?" He gestures between them. "This is more than I expected. 2 Targaryens, trained, experienced, apparently functional. A thread of something that might, on another face, be warmth. Sir Willem was right to put you together. I doubted it at the time." "What do you want from us?" Daenerys asks. "The realm, not to tear itself apart. I've been trying to achieve this for 30 years with limited success." He looks at her. "What do you want?" She doesn't flinch. "Justice for my family. A throne that doesn't burn people who disagree with it. The wall reinforced and taken seriously before whatever's north of it kills everyone I'd be ruling." A beat. In roughly that order. Varys turns to Jon. "All of that," Jon says. "Plus, I want someone to look at the Night's Watch reports and actually do something about them." "The North first," Daenerys adds. Varys raises an eyebrow. "Most claimants lead with the throne." "Most claimants haven't read the Watch's reports." He studies her, studies Jon. Something settling in his assessment of them, the register shifting from evaluation to the more useful category of these are people I can work with. There is one problem, he says. Jon. One. Viserys. He watches Daenerys' face. Your brother is in Braavos. He's been telling people for years that he is the rightful king of Westeros, and some of them are beginning to believe him. If you return as Targaryens, he will not accept your precedence without a fight. Daenerys says, he has no precedence. Jon's claim supersedes his. Your brother has never accepted a fact that contradicts what he believes he's owed. She knows this. The servants who knew Viserys had been quietly terrified of him, even as a child. Darry had spoken of him with a careful blankness that was its own kind of testimony. She has built a picture of her brother from fragments, and none of the fragments are reassuring. He's not my problem yet, she says. Let's solve the problems in front of us first. Varys. And if he makes himself your problem? She looks at him with the violet eyes that don't waver. Then he's my problem, and I'll handle him. Varys looks at Jon again. Jon shrugs. I've stopped arguing with her. It's generally faster. King's Landing. The months before. 298 AC. They stay in the city for 3 months. It is the most useful 3 months of their lives, and also the most exhausting. Varys moves them twice. New lodgings, new covers, each one slightly better positioned in the city's invisible architecture, and introduces them to people the way Varys introduces people, which is by removing himself from the introduction entirely, so that whoever they're meeting has the impression they've discovered them. They meet Tyrion Lannister by accident at a bookseller's stall near the Street of Steel. Or, rather, the accident is orchestrated with a precision that neither of them understood at the time, and that Tyrion, when he admitted it later, described as Varys' idea of a joke. Tyrion is standing at the stall arguing with the owner about the second volume of a history that everyone agrees is incomplete, and the owner doesn't have. He is, Jon notices, simultaneously conducting this argument and reading 4 other books with his arms, which is technically impossible, and which Tyrion manages through a system of stacking, tilting, and ignoring everything Varys would have called a dignified posture. Daenerys says, unprompted, the second volume is in the Citadel's private collection. There's a copy in Old Town. Tyrion turns. Sees her. His eyes do a very rapid assessment of everything about her that is conspicuous, and then, with professional smoothness, shows none of it. I know about the Old Town copy, he says. I've written to request it twice and been politely ignored both times. The master of the collection is a man named Maester Elendry, she says. He corresponds with a scholar in the Vale who corresponds with a friend of mine. If you'd like, I can ask. Tyrion stares at her, then at Jon, who is standing half a step back in the manner he's developed over the past 3 months. Present, attentive, not drawing attention. Tyrion reads the dynamic between them with the speed of a man who has spent his life reading dynamics. What friend? He asks. A well-connected one. How delightfully vague. He shifts the books in his arms. Tyrion Lannister. And before you decide whether to tell me your name, yes, I know who you are. I've suspected for 2 weeks. And no, I have no interest in telling my father. He'd do something complicated and efficient with you, and I find complicated, efficient things irritating in direct proportion to how often they work. Daenerys doesn't move. You know who we are. Silver hair, violet eyes, a young man who carries himself like someone who's been trained by someone good and has decided not to show it. He tilts his head. Varys has been very busy lately. One tends to notice. Jon says, what do you want? Wine, mostly. A world that makes slightly more sense than this one. And possibly, he glances at Daenerys, to meet the people who might actually fix some of what's broken, before someone in the Red Keep kills them first out of habit. They went for wine. It turned into 6 hours. It turned into the most comprehensive introduction to the actual workings of King's Landing that either of them had received, delivered in Tyrion's rapid, digressive, frequently hilarious, and always precise manner. He told them about Cersei. He told them about Joffrey with the flat economy of a man who loves his nephew and knows exactly what he is. He told them about the small council and its various corruptions, and about Littlefinger's treasury games, and about his father, who he described as the most capable man in the realm and also its most dangerous piece of furniture. He didn't ask them about their plans. He didn't offer his allegiance, or make promises, or perform any of the gestures that Jon had been taught to distrust. He just talked to them, as people. When they finally left, Jon said, "He's going to be an ally." "He already decided," Daenerys said. "He decided in the first 10 minutes. He spent the rest of it making sure we were worth it." "Were we?" She considered. "He's still here. That's his answer. The Red Keep, Barristan Selmy, 298 AC. Barristan comes to them, not through Varys. He comes because he is Barristan Selmy, and he has spent 40 years in service to kings and has developed, over those years, the ability to find the thing he's looking for before anyone tells him to look. He finds Jon in the yard of a blacksmith Varys uses as a dead-drop location. Jon is there to pick up a packet of information, and Barristan is there because Barristan saw him watching the training yard outside the Red Keep 3 days ago and noted the way he watched it, not with tourist curiosity, but with the critical professional attention of someone assessing both technique and personnel, and followed the thread. He is an old man, an extraordinary old man, one of those people in whom the craft has compressed itself so thoroughly that age barely touches it. He stands in the blacksmith's yard and looks at Jon and says nothing at first. Jon says, "Sir Barristan, you know who I am. I've read every account of every battle you've been in for the past 40 years. Barristan raises an eyebrow. "And I think the histories underestimate the Duskendale action. They credit the strategy to Tywin Lannister, but the execution at the wall breach was yours." A beat. No one has ever said that. No one was paying attention to the right details. Barristan looks at him for a long moment. Your grip on the sword you're not carrying. The way you keep your right hand loose. Old habit from a blade you've been training with. He tilts his head. You're good. Better than good, probably, for your age. I had a good teacher. Who? Myself, mostly. And someone who watches very carefully and never forgives sloppy form. Barristan understands he means the girl. He's already seen her twice in the city. She is not as invisible as she thinks, which is to say she is perfectly invisible to everyone who isn't looking for something, and visible immediately to anyone who is. I swore an oath to protect the Targaryen kings, he says. I fulfilled that oath poorly. I watched Aerys burn people and told myself it wasn't my place to intervene. His voice is level, not defensive, past that. I've lived with that for 15 years. Jon waits. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. He says it plainly. No drama. The statement of a man who has done the accounting and arrived at a number he can live with. Jon says, she won't burn people. I know. He looks at the young man across from him. Neither will you. How do you know that? Because someone built you well. He turns to go. Tell her I'd like to meet her, at her convenience. A pause at the gate. Tell her Sir Willem Darry's sword is at his daughter's disposal. He left it to me when he died. I've been waiting to return it. He goes. Jon stands in the blacksmith's yard for a while. He thinks about a dying knight who built a chain of people to protect 2 children he barely knew, and how that chain has been holding weight for 14 years. and how chains of that kind only work if every link decides to hold. Barristan is a link. He goes to tell Daenerys, King's Landing, Robert dying, 298 AC. The boar hunt happens. They find out through Varys's network before the official announcement, 3 hours early, enough time to establish new positions in the city and make sure they're not in any of the places they've been frequenting, because a dying king produces paranoia in proportion to his proximity to death, and paranoid men look for convenient enemies. Daenerys takes this harder than Jon expected. Not grief, exactly. She has no affection for Robert Baratheon, the man who wanted her entire family dead. But she stares at the wall of their current lodgings for a long time when the news comes and Jon leaves her alone with it, which he's learned to do. Eventually she says, "If he'd known, he would have killed me. Before anything else." "Yes. And I'd have wanted him dead for that." "Probably. Instead, he's dying of a boar, and I'm—" She stops. "I feel nothing. That seems wrong. He murdered your family. He loved Lyanna." Jon goes still. "Your mother," she says, not looking at him. "He went to war for her. He was, from everything I've read, genuinely devastated when she died. And she chose Rhaegar, not him. And everything that followed from that choice. The war, the deaths, us, all of it, started there." She finally looks at him. "Doesn't that seem strange? That the whole thing began with one person loving another person?" "It usually does. I thought it would feel more consequential. When he died. Like the end of something." "It is the end of something. But it doesn't feel like it. The beginning of things never feels like the end of things," Jon says, "even when they're the same event." She looks at him for a moment. "You occasionally say something very perceptive, and I never know whether you planned it." "I never plan it." "I know. That's what makes it annoying. King's Landing, Viserys, 298 AC. Viserys finds them first. He shouldn't have been able to. Varys's network is careful. Their covers are solid. They have been in the city for 2 months without incident. But Viserys has been in Braavos for years among people who trade information for coin, and he has been paying, obsessively, for anything connected to the name Targaryen. And eventually, the coin reached a man who knew a man who'd seen a silver-haired girl on the Street of Silk. He appears at their lodgings on a grey afternoon. Jon opens the door. He knows immediately. The colouring, the bearing, the specific entitlement worn like armour. Viserys has Daenerys' hair and their father's eyes, and something in the jaw that probably belongs to Rhaegar, and he wears all of it with the aggressive deliberateness of someone who knows his face is political and has decided to lean into it. "You must be the bastard," Viserys says. Jon steps back and lets him in, which Viserys clearly didn't expect. He moves into the room and stops when he sees Daenerys standing by the window. The reunion is not what it might have been. She looks at her brother, studying him the way she studies everything. And he looks at her with an expression that begins as something genuine and cracks through several others before settling into the performance of authority. "You're alive," he says. "Yes." "I looked for you." "I know." A beat. He looks around the room. The books, the maps, Jon in the doorway, the white wolf that has appeared silently beside him. Viserys does not react well to Ghost. His hand twitches toward where a sword would be if he had one. "That's a wolf." "Also, yes," Jon says. Viserys ignores him. "We need to talk. About the plan." "Which plan?" Daenerys asks. "The restoration. Our restoration." He moves into the center of the room with the manner of a man claiming territory he already owns. "I've been building alliances in Essos for 2 years. The Dothraki, potentially. The sellsword companies. Bravosi bankers who remember the old debts. He looks at her. You're the last piece. You and I together, we present a unified Targaryen claim, and there are 3 of us, she says. He stops. She glances at Jon. Viserys turns, looks at him with the full weight of the meaning arriving late. Something crosses his face. Not anger yet, but the ground beneath which anger grows. He is Rhaegar's son, Daenerys says, born of Lyanna Stark. His claim precedes yours. The silence in the room is the silence of a man trying to locate a response in a world that has just been reorganized around him without his consent. Then, that's not... He stops, starts again. His voice has changed, the performance cracking. Rhaegar had no... Elya's children died. Everyone knows. Elya's children died, Jon says. I'm Lyanna Stark's son. It's different. Viserys looks at Daenerys. You believe this? I've believed it for a year. Ned Stark's letters confirm it. Varys has been protecting him since birth. Varys. He says the name like an accusation. You've already talked to Varys. You've been planning this without me. We didn't know where you were. You didn't look. She holds his gaze. No, we didn't. Not unkindly, but without the apology he's looking for. Viserys. Think about what you're being offered. A unified Targaryen claim. 3 of us, not 2. The North through Jon Stark blood, the South through our name. He has the better claim. You're asking me to step aside. I'm asking you to join a cause that is larger than any one claim. He looks at her for a long time, then at Jon, the bastard with the grey eyes and the wolf and the infuriating self-possession of someone who doesn't care whether Viserys is impressed. And if I refuse, Viserys asks. Jon says, then you go back to Braavos and build your alliance, and we build ours, and we'll solve the same problem from 2 directions, and whoever solves it first gets the credit. He shrugs. I'm not going to fight you for it, but I'm also not going to wait. Viserys stares at him. Then slowly, you genuinely don't care about the throne. I care about the realm. The throne is just where you sit to care about it. More silence. Ghost sits down, which reduces the menace of his presence by approximately nothing. Viserys looks at the wolf, then at Daenerys, then at the floor. When he looks up again, something has shifted. Not warmth. Warmth is not where Viserys lives, but a calculation that has arrived at a different answer than the one he walked in with. The Dothraki contacts are real, he says finally. Whatever you think of how I've spent the last 2 years, the contacts are real. If you need them, I have them. Daenerys says, we might. Then you might need me. We might. He sits down. He sits down in the chair like a man who has renegotiated a contract and is not entirely sure if he won or lost, and has decided to act as if he won until he works out the math. I want a role, he says, not a ceremonial one. Real authority over something? The Dothraki contacts, Daenerys says. If we need them, you manage that. He nods. Once. Fine. Ghost puts his head on Viserys' knee. Viserys looks at the wolf with the expression of a man who has decided not to react to this. The wolf looks back at him with absolutely no interest in whatever Viserys has decided. Jon and Daenerys look at each other across the room. She is almost smiling. He is not. But it's close. King's Landing. Joffrey. The aftermath. Joffrey's reign lasts 11 days before he does something that cannot be undone. Ned Stark's execution. They find out in real time. Varys' network is extraordinarily fast when it needs to be, and this is the kind of event his network was built for. A runner. A message. 2 lines. Jon reads it once. He goes to the window and stands there. Daenerys comes up behind him. She reads the message over his shoulder. She puts her hand on his arm. Not a gesture she makes often. She's not an often physical person, but she makes it now. "I'm sorry," she says. He doesn't say anything for a while. She leaves her hand there. Eventually, "He was protecting us." His voice is flat. "Both of us. He spent his whole life carrying a secret that didn't belong to him, and it killed him. Yes. He didn't deserve that. No, he didn't." Jon steps back from the window. His face has done something. Closed. In the way it closes when he's moved something to the place where he keeps the things he can't afford to feel yet. She knows this face. She's seen it for 14 years. She also knows that what's being stored rather than felt doesn't disappear and will require payment eventually. "Joffrey's made it easy," he says. "How?" "He just killed the most honorable man in the realm for political expediency. Every lord who admired Ned Stark, and there were many, just got a reason." He turns. "We needed a rallying point. He just gave us one." Daenerys looks at him steadily. "That's cold. It's true. You can grieve and be correct simultaneously." He looks at her. Something's shifting. "I know." He sits down. The closed face stays closed, but she can see the seams. "He was the closest thing I had to a father who..." He stops. "He did everything wrong. Protecting me. He did it in ways that cost him everything. And he never let me thank him." She sits across from him. "He knew. People like Ned Stark always know. You sound certain." "I am. He saw you every year. He knew what you were becoming." She meets his eyes. That was his thank you. Watching it happen. Jon sits with this. The candle burns. King's Landing. The plan. 298 AC. They meet in Tyrion's rooms because Tyrion's rooms are improbably the safest location Varys has available. He's been using the Imp's wine cellar as a dead drop for years with Tyrion's knowledge and tacit consent. And the combination of Lannister name, guards, and Tyrion's comprehensive unpredictability makes it functionally impenetrable. The five of them. Jon, Daenerys, Tyrion, Varys, Barristan. The table has a map of the realm on it and 3 empty wine cups and 1 full one, which belongs to Tyrion. Daenerys stands. She doesn't sit in meetings anymore. She's found she thinks better standing. Jon sits, which she's also noticed, and which is the reverse of her natural mode, and says something about them that she hasn't fully articulated yet. "Joffrey has made enemies faster than he's made allies," she begins. "The execution has alienated the North. The Stark name carries the Northern Lords, and the Northern Lords carry armies. Robb Stark is already mobilizing. Tyrion. He'll be declared king in the North within the month, which is a problem if we want a unified realm, but a short-term asset if Joffrey is the enemy. Varys. The Tyrells are uncommitted. They were loyal to the Targaryens historically. Mace Tyrell is vain and wants a queen on the throne. His daughter, Jon says. Margaery. She'd be a queen. You've been reading the noble houses. I've been reading the noble houses for 4 years. He looks at the map. The Tyrells are the hinge. If they go to Joffrey, we're fighting an entrenched king with the largest harvest in Westeros behind him. If they come to us, they need a reason. Daenerys finishes. They need to believe we can win. Tyrells don't join losing causes. Barristan. With respect, you have no army, no fleet, no gold. We have the name, Daenerys says. The Targaryen name is either an asset or a liability, depending on how old the person you say it to is and how much they've lost. We have more than the name. She looks around the table. We have Tyrion Lannister. which means we have the most respected mind in the realm attached to our cause, which also means we have an implicit argument that the Lannister family is not unified behind Joffrey. Tyrion, I haven't technically declared for anyone. You're here. I'm here for the wine. Jon, you're here because Varys told you what we were planning and you stayed anyway. A beat. Tyrion refills his cup. The North, Jon continues. We go to Robb Stark before he gets too far into his own war. We offer him a united strategy rather than two separate ones. He's fighting for his father's honor. We give him a framework where that honor is honored. Varys, Robb Stark will want to know who you are. Then we tell him, Daenerys says. He may not believe it. He'll believe Ned's letter. Jon looks at her. He left letters, Ned, for both of us, sealed, with Varys as witness. She blinks. This is new. When did... He brought them 3 years ago, gave them to Varys in case of his death. Jon's voice doesn't change. Varys gave them to me after the execution. She absorbs this. The fact that Ned had prepared for his own death, that he'd thought of everything, as he always had, quietly, without telling anyone, building contingencies for the thing he hoped would never happen, and arranged for anyway. All right, she says. We go north. We talk to Robb Stark. She looks at the map. And the wall. Barristan. That's 2 separate campaigns. No, 1 campaign with 2 fronts. The political front here, Joffrey, the succession, the alliance, and the real front in the north, which is the actual existential threat. She looks at Jon. You take the wall, I take the south, he says. You've been thinking about dividing this for a while. Since Varys told us about the Watch's reports. I don't love it. It's the most efficient allocation of what we are. You're the one who's been obsessing over the Watch reports for months. You know the North better than I do instinctively. You know what to say to men who need to believe in something. She tilts her head. I know how to manage the politics. I've been reading the great houses since I was 10. She's right, Tyrion says, not helpfully. Jon looks at him. You could have stayed quiet for 10 more seconds. I could have. I didn't want to. Jon looks back at Daenerys. She's watching him with the expression she has when she knows she's correct and is waiting to see if he'll admit it. He admits it. Fine, he says. But we stay in contact. Varys's network. Constant updates. Obviously. And if either of us gets into trouble, then the other one comes, she says. That was always going to be true. The map on the table with its lines and names and distances. The 5 people around it, each one improbable, each one necessary. The city outside, moving in its relentless morning way, not knowing yet what is being planned in a room above a wine cellar. Jon says, we leave at dawn. The North, Robb Stark, 298 AC. Jon reaches Robb's camp 3 weeks into the march south. He comes as himself. No cover, no alias. Just the name he was born with, and a sealed letter from a dead man. Ghost walks beside him. The northern soldiers see the wolf and stop what they're doing. Direwolves are not precisely rare in the north, but a man arriving alone with one tends to command a certain immediate attention. Robb comes out of the command tent himself. He is 16 and tall, and very clearly his father's son. The jaw, the colouring, the specific, deliberate quality of a man who is holding something very heavy and refusing to let the weight show. His own direwolf, Grey Wind, pads out beside him and regards Ghost with the measured acknowledgement of animals who already know each other on some register that humans can't access. He looks at Jon. Ned Stark's bastard, he says. That's one of my names, yes. He wrote about you. Robb studies him. He was careful about what he wrote, but he wrote about you. More than he wrote about most things. He glances at Ghost. He said you had a wolf. He always notices the important details. Rob's expression does something complicated. He says, "Come inside," and turns and goes back into the tent. And it is not an invitation so much as an assumption that Jon will follow, which is itself a kind of test. Jon follows. Inside, maps, letters, the organized chaos of a campaign in its early weeks when the strategy is still being built from first principles. Robb sits, and Jon sits, and Grey Wind lies down between them. "Show me the letter," Robb says. Jon gives him the letter. He reads it. He reads it a second time. His face doesn't change in the way Jon has come to understand means something is changing considerably. He sets the letter down. "He says you're..." "Yes." "Rhaegar Targaryen's son." "Yes." "By Lyanna." "By Lyanna." Jon watches him. "She was your aunt." "I know who she was." Robb looks at him. "You're my cousin." "By blood, yes." Robb sits with this for a moment. He looks at the letter again, then at Jon. "He trusted you with this for how long?" "He told me 14 years after the fact. He's been carrying it since before I could walk." "That sounds like him." Not bitterly, with the grief of someone who knew the person and misses them. He sets the letter aside. "What do you want?" "The same thing you want. Joffrey gone. A realm that works. The North safe." Jon pauses. "And the wall reinforced before whatever's north of it becomes everyone's problem." The Watch reports. "You've read them." Robb nods. "Father believed them. He talked about it in the last 2 years. The escalation, the pattern." He looks at the map. "We can't fight 2 wars. I know. The wall is mine. The south is Daenerys's." Robb looks up. "She's here. In King's Landing. Working the political front." Jon watches his cousin's face. "I know what you're thinking." "What am I thinking?" "That a Targaryen queen is not what you went to war for. That your claim is your father's honor, not a dynasty. That having us appear is either an answer or a complication, depending on how it's handled." Robb leans back. "You've been talking to Varys." "He's been talking to us." A beat. "I don't like Varys." "Nobody likes Varys. He's useful anyway." Robb looks at him for a long time. Whatever he's deciding, it's happening somewhere behind the careful face. The stark face. The face Jon knows because he has something of it himself, apparently. "If I march with you," Robb says, "the Northern Lords march with me. They didn't sign on for a Targaryen restoration. They signed on to avenge Ned Stark. He died protecting 2 Targaryen heirs." Jon's voice is level. "That is not a contradiction." Robb says nothing. "He spent his whole life keeping us hidden," Jon continues. "He lied to everyone he knew and loved, including you, for 14 years, because he believed it was the right thing. If his honor means anything, if you're marching for his honor, then you're marching for what he spent that honor protecting." The tent is quiet. Grey Wind gets up and moves to Robb's side. Robb puts his hand on the wolf's head without looking. "I need to talk to my bannerman." "I know. This is going to be a hard conversation." Every important conversation has been hard. Robb looks at him. Something settling. "You are very like him, in a different register." Jon says nothing. "Stay the night," Robb says. "We'll talk more in the morning." He picks up the letter again, folds it. "And Jon," he pauses. "I'm glad he wasn't alone, carrying it, all those years. He means the secret, but he means more than the secret. I'm glad there was someone worth carrying it for." Jon manages to get out of the tent before anything crosses his face that he doesn't want Robb Stark to see. Ghost is waiting outside in the cold. Jon sits down in the dirt beside him and puts his forehead against the wolf's neck and breathes. The night before. King's Landing. He finds her on the roof of the building. She's up there looking north. She always looks north now. The habit of it. The wall in her head. Like a compass fixed on something she can't see yet, but knows is real. The city sprawls in every direction, its light orange against the dark sky. 500,000 people living in confident ignorance of what's coming. He sits beside her. "Are you afraid?" he asks. "Of Joffrey?" "No." "Of the other thing?" she thinks. Actually thinks, rather than giving him the composed answer. "Yes," she admits. "The North terrifies me. Not the politics. The actual North. What the Watch is describing." She hugs her knees. Fire and ice, the old accounts say. The Targaryens were fire. Whatever is coming is ice. That should mean we're the answer, but it doesn't feel that clean in practice. Nothing is ever that clean in practice. No. She looks at him. "Are you afraid?" "Every day." "Of what?" "Of getting it wrong. Of making the decisions wrong and having people die because of it." He looks at the city. "I've been afraid of that since I was 6, and it has not improved with information." She nods. This is the thing they share most completely. Not the blood, not even the history, but the specific weight of responsibility they carry before they've done anything to earn carrying it. "We didn't ask for this," she says. "No." "I used to be angry about that. When I was younger." "What changed?" she thinks. "You, mostly." A small smile. "You have this. I've never known anyone who accepts what they're given the way you do. Not passively, not without grief. But you take what's real, and you work with it. You don't spend energy mourning the version of your life that didn't happen." She glances at him. "I spent a long time mourning that. The version of my life that might have been, if my father hadn't been mad. If the war hadn't happened. If we'd grown up in Dragonstone with dragons and..." She stops. "It's wasted time. I learned that from you." "I learned patience from you," he says. "I would have gone to King's Landing 3 years ago with no allies and no plan." "You kept saying not yet. Because you were going to get us both killed." "Probably." They sit with that for a while. The city below. The stars above. 14 years of growing up side by side. The arguments and the training yards and the books and the harbour and the cold stares after Willem Darry died. Compressed into this night before everything changes. She says, "I don't know how to do this without you nearby." "You don't need me nearby. You've never needed me nearby." "That's not what I said." She looks at the city. "I said I don't know how." Jon looks at her, the silver hair loose tonight, the violet eyes catching the light from the city below, the face of someone he has known longer than he's known anything else. "You figure it out," he says. "That's what you do. That's what you've always done. And if I can't, then you send a raven and I come south." He pauses. "Or you come north. Either way." She looks at him. "We've been in the same house for 12 years, he says, in the same city for 3 months. I think we can manage some distance." "We can," she says. "I just don't want to." He puts his arm around her shoulder, the easy familiarity of two people who have been each other's only constant for most of their lives. She leans into it the way she always has, slightly, just slightly. "When this is over," he says. "When this is over," she agrees. They sit until the city's lights begin to dim with the approach of dawn. Then they go inside, separately, to prepare for what comes next. What if Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen grew up together? They grew up above a harbour that smelled like salt and old rope, in 3 rooms, arguing about which of the 2 harbour cats was whose. They grew up fighting in a practice yard they built themselves, teaching each other in the absence of teachers, finding in the other the only person capable of keeping up with what they were becoming. They grew up with the same secret, not each other's secret, which they learned late, but the deeper one, the one that runs in the blood and doesn't care about names or aliases or the covers Ned Stark built to keep them alive. They are the last house of the dragon. Not together, not in the way the word together gets used for dynasties, not the arranged marriage of claims and bloodlines, and the cold calculation of what 2 names combined produce politically. In the other way, the older way. 2 people who chose each other out of all available options before they knew there was anything to choose. One goes north, one goes south. The wall holds what it holds, and the city holds what it holds, and somewhere between them, in the letters that travel the King's Road and the ravens that go back and forth, something is being built that neither throne nor dynasty has a word for. They'll figure out the word. That's what they do. King's Landing, Daenerys and Tyrion, the small hours. 2 nights before they leave, Tyrion gets drunk enough to be honest. This is not unusual. Tyrion is generally honest. It is one of his most consistent qualities, but there is a tier of honesty he reserves for wine and late nights, and the absence of people who might find the honesty useful against him. Daenerys is still awake when he arrives. She's been awake for most of the night with the map and Ned's letters, and the letters Varys has been collecting for a decade on the succession question, building a picture that keeps acquiring new dimensions as she stares at it. He drops into the chair across from her without ceremony, sets a bottle on the table between them. "You don't sleep," he says. "I sleep, in the afternoons, when the city is loud and nobody's being strategic." He pours 2 cups. She takes 1 because refusing would be rude, and also because the wine at this particular hour might genuinely help. "You're afraid," he says. "Not a question. Of course I'm afraid. I'm going to walk into a city full of people who want me dead and try to convince them I'm the solution to their problems. You'll be magnificent." That's not reassuring. People can be magnificent and still fail. He concedes this with a tilt of his head. What are you actually afraid of? Underneath the logistics. She looks at the map. Being my father. He doesn't say anything right away, which she's come to understand means he's taking it seriously. "I have his blood," she says. The histories make it very clear what that produced. And yes, I know. The histories also document 100 years of Targaryens who didn't burn people. But the pattern is there. The fire is real. There are moments when I'm angry, and I feel something in me that She stops. I keep it managed, but it's there. "The capacity for cruelty is in everyone," Tyrion says. "What matters is whether you choose it. Don't simplify it." "I'm not simplifying, I'm compressing." "The capacity and the choice are 2 different things, and you're conflating them." He leans forward. "You are not heiress. You're not heiress for the same reason I am not my father, despite sharing the blood. Because we made a decision at some age to look at what our blood produced and say, not that." He refills his cup. "The decision is ongoing. It requires work. But you've been doing the work since I met you, and probably long before." She's quiet for a moment. "Jon said something similar. 3 years ago. Jon is occasionally perceptive, yes, I've noticed. He's often perceptive. He just doesn't perform it. Unlike some people." Tyrion raises his cup at himself. She almost smiles. She does smile. He's going to need your letters. When he goes north, the lords who matter, the watch commanders, the people you know who he doesn't. I'll write them. And the Iron Bank, I know people. Yes. He waves a hand. Daenerys? Stop planning for 10 seconds. She stops, looks at him. I joined this cause, he says, because I believe it's the right one. Not because it's the Targaryen cause. That's never mattered to me. Because the two of you are the first people I've encountered in my adult life who are trying to solve the actual problem rather than position themselves relative to it. He looks at his cup. My father positions. My sister positions. Robert positioned. Joffrey is too stupid to position, which is worse. And us. You and Jon are trying to fix something. You might fail. You're trying anyway. He looks at her. That matters. Even if it doesn't work. The trying matters. She holds his gaze. It will work. See, that's the other thing I like about you. You believe it. He believes it. Most people in your position would be hedging. If it works, when it's possible, should circumstances permit. You say it will work like you've already seen the other side of it. I have, she says. In my head. 1,000 times. I know what the other side looks like. Tyrion raises his cup. Then let's get there. She drinks with him. Outside, the city is quiet for once. The specific quiet of 3 a.m, when even King's Landing has run out of ways to be loud. Somewhere in the distance, a bell. Ghost somewhere in the building, his breath audible in the silence. He misses you already, Tyrion says. Jon, even though you haven't left yet. He won't say so. No, but I can tell. He does that thing. Looks for you in rooms before he's looked at anything else. He refills his cup. I mention it only because it's data. She looks at the map. He'll be fine. Probably. He's the most capable person I know. He is. Which doesn't prevent missing people. Tyrion studies her. You'll be fine, too. I know. I mention it in case it was useful. It was, she admits. Don't tell him I said that. Absolutely not. He stands. Get some sleep. The spectacular entrance into political history can wait until you're rested. He leaves. She sits for a while longer with the map and the letters, and the future arranged in front of her like a problem she's already solved in theory and has to prove in practice. Then she folds the map. She sleeps. The King's Road. Departure. 298 AC. They leave at dawn. He goes north with Ghost and the 3 men Varys trusted enough to assign, and Tyrion's letters in a satchel, and the specific weight of the Night's Watch reports that he has been reading for months and that don't get lighter no matter how often you read them. She goes south, into the city, into the political machinery, into the long campaign of convincing people that what they need and what she is offering are the same thing. They stop at the gate. Neither of them says anything for a moment. She adjusts the strap on his satchel, which doesn't need adjusting. He notices this and doesn't say anything about it, which is its own language between them. Robb Stark, she says. I'll write when I've spoken to him. Be honest with him. Don't. I know how to talk to people. You know how to be competent at people. That's not the same. She looks up at him. Let him see that you're Ned's, not just Rhaegar's. It will matter. He nods. And the Watch Commander, Mormont, don't lead with the blood. Lead with the reports. Daenerys. What? I have a plan. She exhales. I know you have a plan. I'm improving it. I can see that. A beat. The city waking up around them. The first sounds of the market. The distant bells. She says, come back. I will. I know. Come back anyway. He looks at her with the grey eyes that are entirely Lyanna Stark's, and something else underneath that belongs to a heritage older and stranger than either family name. He says, "Take care of Viserys. He's going to be difficult. He's your brother. He's a Targaryen. We're all difficult." Jon almost smiles. She does smile. Then he goes north, Ghost at his heel, the morning light slanting low across the King's Road, and she watches him until the road curves and takes him out of sight. She stands there a moment longer. Then she turns and walks back into the city that is going to be hers. The work is waiting. It always is. The wall. Arrival. 298 AC.
Robb looked at Bran.
Castle Black is nothing like he imagined. He's read about it for years. The histories, the Watcher's reports, the accounts that manage to convey scale without conveying the specific reality of what scale feels like in a body standing at the base of 700 feet of ancient ice. It rises above him in the grey dawn and says nothing, the way very large and very old things say nothing. And he stands there for a moment just absorbing it. Ghost sits beside him. The wolf looks up at the wall and does the tail thump that means something significant. Jon doesn't know exactly what. The gate opens, the Lord Commander comes out. Mormont is large and grizzled and looks at Jon the way everyone who knows things looks at Jon for the first time, registering the grey eyes, the dark hair, the wolf, the specific quality of a person who has arrived somewhere they belong before they've technically been invited. "You're younger than your letters suggested," Mormont says. The letters were thorough. They were. "I've never received a letter from someone not yet 15 that included a strategic analysis of our ranging deployment." He studies Jon. "Varys sent you. I sent myself. Varys helped. There's a distinction. A small one. Jon looks up at the wall. "I'd like to see what you're dealing with. Not the reports. I've read the reports. The actual ground." Mormont looks at him for another moment. "Get inside," he says. "Eat something. Then I'll show you." They go inside. The brothers watch Jon the way the servants at Saltwater House used to watch him and Daenerys, trying to catalogue something that didn't fit the available categories. The wolf doesn't help with this. Neither does the quality of silence Jon carries, the way he enters a space and immediately knows where everything is. Over food, the Watcher's food, which is not good, which Jon eats without complaint because complaining about rations is a thing you learn not to do the first time you're seriously hungry. Mormont talks. He tells Jon things he hasn't put in the official ravens, the tone of the ranging reports before he sanitizes them for the capital's consumption. The faces of the men who've come back changed. The specific silence that falls over Castle Black on certain nights when the wind is wrong, and the cold has a direction it shouldn't. Jon listens. He asks questions. Good questions. Mormont can tell they're good by the way they reroute him toward things he hadn't thought to say. The questions of someone who has been building a model and is filling in the gaps. "You actually believe it," Mormont says. Not with relief. Something more complicated than relief. "I've believed it for 2 years. Daenerys believed it before I did." He looks at the fire. The reports describe a pattern. Patterns don't happen by accident. Most people hear the pattern and dismiss it because the conclusion is inconvenient. I don't have the luxury of inconvenient conclusions. Jon looks at him. "I need to see the top of the wall." Mormont takes him up. "The lift is a slow cage on a counterweight, and the cold increases with every foot of elevation until they break above the battlements, and the world opens up, and Jon stops breathing for a moment. The north stretches to the horizon. Forest, dark and dense, the tree line unbroken for miles, and beyond that, something. Not visible, not exactly, a quality of the air, the directional cold that the reports describe, the cold that moves rather than sits. Ghost had stopped at the base of the lift. He'd looked up at the wall for a moment, then turned and faced north, and stayed there, rigid, until they came back down. Jon looked north for a long time. You feel it, Mormont says. Yes. Most people don't. Standing up here, Jon doesn't say anything for a moment. He's thinking about what Daenerys said on the harbour. Fire and ice, the old accounts say, and about what it means to be the answer to a question you didn't choose to be the answer to. He says, how many men do you actually have? Not the official number. 612.
You're young.
I know what the official number says.
Too young.
And what do you need?
But the time is the
Mormont
time.
laughs,
The waiting can't
short,
continue.
without humour.
The man told
What
Bran
I need,
what the man
and what
wants.
I'll get, are
Brynden
different
Rivers,
conversations.
a Targaryen bastard
What if they
who
weren't?
had lived 150
Mormont
years
looks at him.
and who had been in this cave
I'm
for
going
most
to
of it,
fix this,
connected to the
Jon
wheels,
says.
watching
Not
the
with
realm through the
bravado,
woods,
with the
maintaining
flat
the
certainty
specific
of someone who has
vigil
been
that someone
thinking
had been
about this
maintaining
problem
since
for
the
2
long night,
years
and that
has
required,
worked out
that
the
demanded
answer.
a successor. Because
Not
the vigil
alone,
could not end,
Daenerys is
and the man
managing the
maintaining
political
it was
side,
ending.
the alliance building,
You have the
the
sight.
resources.
I know. You have the
What
sight
I'm doing up
stronger than
here is
anyone
the
I've
other
felt in
half.
100 years.
I need to
The
understand what
blood
you're
is
fighting
right.
before I can
The
tell the
Stark
people
blood
holding the
and the
purse
first
strings
men
what
blood
winning
and
requires.
the specific combination that
He
produces
looks
the
north
channel.
again.
The old man's eye
So,
focused on Bran.
What do you
The
need?
channel is what matters,
Mormont studies
not
him.
the person. The
He has
channel
been
is
at
what the
this wall
trees
for
need a
20
mind
years.
that can receive
He has
what the
met
trees
lords
see,
and
and
knights,
that can process
and the
the
occasional
seeing into
claimant
action.
to something.
Action.
And they
The
arrive
army
with
is
their own
growing.
certainties and
You've
their
seen
own
it.
agendas, and they
The
look
Night
at the
King is
wall,
building his
and they
fort.
feel exactly
The
nothing.
wall holds for now.
Because the wall is old and far
But the
from
wall
anything
was
that
never meant
matters to them.
hold forever.
And the dead
The wall
are
was
not
meant
their
to
problem.
hold until the realm
This
was
young
ready
man
to
is
fight.
looking north with the
The
eyes
realm
of
has
someone
spent
for whom it is very
8,000
much
years
his
not
problem.
being ready.
Tell
The
me
eye
who you
closed.
really are first,
Opened.
Mormont
You're
says.
going to make them ready.
Not the cover story.
How? By seeing.
Jon looks at him.
By showing.
I'm not
By being
asking
the
for
bridge
court
between
protocol,
the Weirwood network
Mormont
and the
says.
people who need to know.
I'm
what the
asking
network
because
knows.
I've read enough of the old accounts to know
Bloodraven looked at
that the
Bran.
blood matters when it comes
You
to what's
cannot
out there.
Fight the army.
And whatever
cannot
blood you
command
have,
the army that fights the army.
it's not what you're
You are
pretending.
not a warrior.
Jon
You
is
are an
quiet
eye,
for
the
a
eye
moment.
that sees the battlefield from above.
Then he says the
and
name,
that tells the commanders where to move,
Both names.
when to move, and what
the
they're
full truth
facing.
of it, standing on
The
top
eye
of the
and
wall
the
in the
sky.
grey morning with Ghost far
Bran
below
thought
waiting,
about this.
the
He was
cold
8
pressing
years
in
old,
from the north.
and he was being told that his
Mormont
purpose,
listens.
the specific reason that the
He
green
doesn't say
side had
anything for a
chosen
while.
him, had manifested in him,
Then,
had been calling to him since the
Your father
three-eyed
believed
crow
in the prophecy.
first appeared in his dreams.
I know.
Was not to be a hero,
Do you?
but to be a
Jon
tool,
looks north, at the dark
an
tree line,
instrument.
at whatever is building in the
eye
cold
that saw
beyond
the
it.
battlefield.
I believe in the
He
problem,
thought,
he
from
says.
the rooftops.
Whether I'm the answer
He
to it or
thought,
not,
the view from the
I'll
top
find out.
makes the world make
Mormont
sense.
nods slowly.
He thought,
start
I
tomorrow,
couldn't fly with
he
wings.
says. I'll
He
show
told me
you
to fly with
everything.
eyes. And this is
Below
what flying
them,
with eyes looks
far
like,
down,
not soaring
Ghost
above
looks
the world
north
like
and
a
doesn't
bird,
move.
but
The
seeing the
wall
world from above
hums
like
its
a map,
ancient hum against their
seeing the
boots.
connections between the
Somewhere
past,
to the south,
seeing the shape
in a
of the
city
thing.
full of people who don't know
He
what's
thought,
coming, Daenerys
this
is
is what I was
already
born for.
working. The
Not the
distance
timing,
between them,
the
for the
seeing.
first time in 14 years,
How long does the training
feels
take?
real.
Long
He'll
enough,
manage
not
it.
years, months.
He always
The channel
has.
is natural.